such accurate and deadly weapons were devastating to the static formations that were employed on these.
That's basically what I was saying, right? What's up, Squad? It's your Squid. You know what the video's about. Let's get into it.
Many thanks to the Great Courses Plus.
As always, if you want to watch that video,
more on them later.
Go and watch that video. The link is at the bottom of the description.
Tiger Star on YouTube.
After all the stuff that makes me money.
All throughout history. If you haven't already, be sure to check his channel out. He'll be joining us to read out some primary sources from the war.
My prediction, what made the American Civil War so deadly? My prediction is new weapons, old military tactics. That's my guess, is that it was like military tactics designed for charges and whatnot, with weapons that were designed for fucking mowing people down.
With an impressive
I think that'll be the main factor, I think.
I'll be doing the same for his video, so be sure to check out my southern accent as well. If someone were to ask you, what is the costliest war in American history, how would you answer? Many would impulsively respond with the Second World War, or even Vietnam. However, this is simply untrue. The American Civil War was, and still is, the costliest conflict in American history.
Interesting.
In fact, up until about 50 years ago, the casualties of the Civil War were higher than any other American wars combined.
Wow.
And why was this the case? There were few automatic weapons, no tanks, or high explosives. I'm Griffin Johnson, the armchair historian.
Wow, that sort of blows my theory out of the water, doesn't it?
What exactly made the American Civil War so lethal? First, it must be understood that far more men died of sickness than combat. Approximately 67% of all Civil War casualties were the result of infectious diseases, such as measles, dysentery, and smallpox.
Out in the trenches and stuff, you know?
This was the natural result of assembling so many men from different areas in one location. It was exacerbated by the lack of sanitation and fresh water. The loss of men to disease had significant implications on the battlefield. For example, at the Battle of Chancellorsville, 5,000 Confederate soldiers were rendered unfit for duty due to smallpox contamination. That said, disease will inevitably cause casualties in any war. However, combat in the American Civil War was still exceptionally deadly, and this was for a variety of reasons. The first reason why combat was so deadly was the extensive use of what is perhaps the most infamous munitions of the war, the Manet bomb, which was named after its inventor, the French army officer Claude.
I think I learned about that in a previous video on one of those bits of paper.
Loaded with musket balls were very slow to reload, as their ammunition had to fit tightly into the barrel.
Apologies if you hear my central heating kick on, or if you hear people in the basement and stuff. I've been waiting days for them to be finished, and I think they are actually going to be finished today, because they're doing way more work than they have been. But I couldn't wait any longer to just be posting more than shorts on the channel, so yeah, sorry if you hear it. Also, my wife needs to stay warm.
Conical bullet which fit loosely in the barrel. When the rifle was fired, the hollow cavity in the projectile expanded, allowing the round to fit firmly against the rifling, giving it a spin, which drastically increased accuracy and reload speed. However, the round itself was slow and heavy, and could cause immense damage to the body. Bones that were hit generally shattered, necessitating the amputation of limbs in many cases. But rifled muskets weren't the only thing that increased battlefield casualties. The most formidable weapon in the arsenals of both sides was, of course, field artillery, which was invaluable in the 19th century.
Cannons and whatnot?
Improvements in weapon technology resulted in artillery being both deadlier and more accurate than ever before. Explosive shells were able to destroy entire platoons if a direct hit occurred, and the introduction of rifled artillery, such as the Parrott gun, made such hits much more likely. According to eyewitness Sergeant Jonathan Stowe, 15th Massachusetts Infantry,
"What sights I've seen that I now see around me. Shells fly past me every few seconds, carrying away branches from trees and scattering limbs around. I'm in severe pain, furious how the shells fly. I do sincerely hope that I shall not be wounded again."
By far, the factor most responsible for producing casualties in combat, however, was the employment of linear tactics. As can be guessed, such accurate and deadly weapons were devastating to the static formations that were employed on these.
That's basically what I was saying,
Most of the commanders of the war had been trained at the United States Military Academy at West Point. In fact, at least one army in every major battle that was fought during the war was
should learn about the history of that. Evidently, it's really old.
Including such commanders as Ulysses S. Grant and Robert E. Lee. as the doctrine taught at West Point emphasized Napoleonic-era direct approach tactics.
That's exactly what I said. Old school tactics, new school weapons.
And it is equally unsurprising that both sides suffered heavy casualties as a result. It did not help that many of the generals appointed during the war had no prior military experience and were promoted to their political positions. However, it must be understood that there was no better way to fight in open ground at the time. In battles where cover could be used, commanders usually
open this off camera.
Behind it. For example, at the Battle of Antietam, 500 Confederates hidden behind trees and walls were able to delay the advance of several Union brigades attempting to cross what would later be named Burnside's Bridge. The quintessential example of the lethality of Civil War combat is the infamous advance at the Battle of Gettysburg ordered by Robert E. Lee, known as Pickett's Charge. During the assault, 12,500 Confederate infantrymen advanced 1 mile across an open field under very heavy Union rifle and artillery fire. Although some Confederates reached Union lines, the assault was ultimately repulsed, with the Confederates taking over 6,000 casualties.
Jeez, that's a lot.
The accuracy of rifled muskets ensured that Lee's men would begin suffering heavily well before they reached northern lines, and even before it began, the Confederates were being subjected to extensive Union bombardment. Artillery played such a considerable role in the Civil War that, according to Craig Simmons in his book The Battle of Gettysburg, the artillery barrages at Gettysburg may well have been the loudest man-made sound on the North American continent until the detonation of the first atomic bomb. And in the words of Colonel Joseph Mayo of the 3rd Virginia Infantry who fought at Gettysburg,
the first shot or two flew harmlessly over our heads, but soon they began to get the range, and then came pandemonium. First there was an explosion on the top of a tree, and in a second there was another, followed by a piercing shriek. 2 men were killed outright. Company effort suffered terribly, and a lieutenant had his legs shattered.
Below the knee. Fuck. Ow.
Towards the end of the war, the deadliness of combat on open fields was finally recognized by commanders of both sides. Accordingly, both the North and South began to employ static defensive positions and breastworks, as can be seen at the Siege of Petersburg, which was also one of the first times that the Gatling gun was employed in battle, but in a very limited capacity. When the First World War arrived 50 years later,
this is good animation
the Civil War was finally seen as both foreshadowing trench warfare and representing the transition from close order formations in open ground to open order formations in cover. This lesson, however, came at the cost of 620,000 American lives. 8% of American males lost their lives in the American Civil War, and 1 in 4 soldiers would never return home. If you want to learn more about the American Civil War, namely why it was fought and how it was fought, I highly recommend you watch Professor Gary Gallagher's lecture on the entire American Civil War on the site of today's sponsor, The Great Courses Plus. The Great Courses Plus is a
as always, as I said,
on-demand learning service
if you want to go and see The Great Courses Plus and stuff with his code, I'm sure the link will be in his description. You can get to his video by clicking the link in my description.
10,000 video lectures about any major
I'm going to skip the ad and
leading is Robert Wiener's The Long 19 was actually made possible.
Skip the ad.
Historian, or by thank my general staff on description below. Lastly, don't forget to check out Emperor Tiger Star on YouTube for
he's the guy.
Nave, Eric Greenwald,
Patreon, I think that's the end of the video. Yeah, it was. Alright, well yeah, that was cool. Thank you to the people that suggested it in the comment sections of previous videos and whatnot. As I said, yeah, if you want to watch that video without me, if you don't want to watch the reaction video, you just want to watch the actual video itself, the link is right at the bottom of the description after all the stuff that makes me money. Speaking of money, these people pay me. I like money. I can spend it on shit, you know what I mean? So yeah, click the link in my description, join my Patreon, give me some of yours. That would be cool. Failing all of that, hit subscribe. Hit like, leave a comment, you know how YouTube works, you know how you'll help me. I'll see you guys when I look at you. You can see me when you look at me, and thanks so much for watching.